Welcome to the So Much More podcast, where we talk with people in the custom window treatment, soft home furnishings industry, and so much more. I'm your host, Ciel DeGuglielmo. Hi, welcome to today's podcast. In honor of Women's History Month, I thought it might be fun to do a little bit of research about Women's History Month, International Women's Day, and everything that went along with that. I went down a few rabbit holes, as you can imagine. Some of the facts that I found were exciting, some were depressing, some were frustrating, but it was fascinating to see how history has treated women over the years, how women have changed history, and how women have been leaders among us in the last number of decades. So I thought I would just start by sharing that the first Women's History Day was celebrated on February 28, 1909. Its purpose was to commemorate the anniversary of the protest when women from various New York City factories got together to protest poor working conditions. That celebration of that day did not become a regular occurrence for several decades. Women's History Month actually started as Women's History Week in Santa Rosa, California in 1978. The Education Task Force of the Sonoma County Commission on the Status of Women wanted the week to include International Women's Day. And I found this information on the Teacher Starter website. I'll put links to the different resources that I used in the show notes. The recognition of women expanded to other communities, and by 1980, President Jimmy Carter declared the week of March 8th to be National Women's History Week. Predecessors of Carter continued the recognition until Congress designated March as Women's History Month in 1987, almost a full decade after the first Women's History Week. So a few random facts. In 1869, Wyoming Territory, not yet a state, was the first place to give women the right to vote. And in 1890, the then state of Wyoming granted women the right to vote in all elections. Despite that milestone, all American women couldn't vote until 1965 when President Johnson signed the Voting Rights Act. We've all known for quite some time that there is a gender pay gap. The good news is that that gap is narrowing, according to the Pew Research Center. The gender gap in pay has slightly narrowed in the United States over the past 20 years or so. In 2024, women earn an average of 85% of what men earned. Still not good enough, in my opinion, according to their Pew Research Center analysis of median hourly earnings of both full and part-time workers. But in 2003, women only earned 81% as much as men. So it's narrowing. Maybe not as much as we'd like or as fast as we'd like, but it appears to be getting better. The National Women's History Alliance has a fascinating timeline that I will not read to you here, but I will put a link in the show notes. It wasn't until 1971 before it became illegal for employers to refuse to hire women with preschool-aged children. 1972, before it became illegal to deny federal support to educational programs based on sex. We can thank Title IX for that change. In 1983, employers could still put help wanted ads and segregate them by gender. It was 1974 before it became illegal for landlords to discriminate on the basis of sex. And pregnant women could still be forced to take maternity leave based on the ridiculous idea that they were less capable of working in their physical condition. But it wasn't until 1976 that the U.S. government upheld the right for unemployment benefits during the last 3 months of pregnancy, when they were incapable of working. But it was another 2 years before employment discrimination against pregnant women was banned completely. It was 1974 before women could get their own credit cards when the Equal Credit Opportunity Act was finally passed. I was in high school when that happened, and I remember it because I remember how happy my mother was. We are still fighting an uphill battle to be treated equal to men, but there are some exciting firsts that women who are still living today have achieved, as well as some women from the past, and I want to share that with you. First woman to be appointed to the Supreme Court, Sandra Day O'Connor. Other firsts for women: in 1984, Mississippi belatedly ratified the 19th Amendment, granting women the right to vote. You know, the amendment that was passed in 1920. Here are some other firsts. In 1849, Elizabeth Blackwell was instrumental in opening up the field of medicine for women. She was the first woman to earn a medical degree in the U.S., and she focused on providing better health care for women and children. Marie Curie was the first woman to receive a Nobel Peace Prize and the first woman to win two. Her first award was for physics, and her second was in chemistry. In 1987, Aretha Franklin was the first woman to be inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. In 1739, Elizabeth Timothy became the first female in the American colonies to assume the role of publisher and editor of a newspaper. On January 20th, 2021, Kamala Harris was the first woman sworn in as Vice President of the United States. In 1916, Jeannette Rankin was the first woman elected to U.S. Congress. She spent her career campaigning for world peace. In 1968, Shirley Chisholm was the first Black woman to be elected to Congress, and then with that experience under her belt, she was the first Black woman to run for president in 1972. Currently, women make up 28% of the members of Congress. Sally Ride was the first woman in space. In 1933, Eleanor Roosevelt held the first inaugural press conference for female reporters. In the next 12 years, she conducted 348 press conferences aimed at women journalists. In 1984, Joan Benoit wins the first women's Olympic marathon. Women were not admitted to run marathons until 1967, when Kathrine Switzer competed in the Boston Marathon. Women were not allowed to compete because it was believed they weren't strong enough or had the endurance to run a marathon. At the start of that marathon, an official tried to tear off her bib to stop her from competing. She finished in 4 hours and 20 minutes. Katharine Graham was the first woman to become a Fortune 500 CEO in 1972. Edith Wharton was the first woman to win a Pulitzer Prize in 1921. In 1928, Amelia Earhart was the first woman to cross the Atlantic as a pilot in an airplane. The first time a woman won an Academy Award for the Best Director was, wait for it, 2010. Catherine Bigelow's Hurt Locker won 6 Academy Awards that year. In 1997, Madeleine Albright became the first female Secretary of State. In 2016, Hillary Clinton became the first female presidential nominee of a major party. Some random facts that I discovered in my research. Some of the best states for women-owned businesses include California, Colorado, New York, Florida, and Vermont. This is based on metrics like percentage of female-owned small businesses, women-to-men pay ratios, female unemployment rates, number of female-owned companies per 10,000 residents of each state, and how many women-owned businesses in each state pull in $1 million or more for annual revenue. The number of STEM degrees for women has increased 93% since 2008. Here's a fact that many of us who own workrooms can relate to. Women made up the majority of home-based workers during the pandemic. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, in 4 out of 5 occupation groups, women made up a larger share of home-based workers than of all workers. In 1966, Indira Gandhi became the first, and to date the only, female Prime Minister of India. So here's some good news for women business owners. The percentage of women-owned businesses in the U.S. has risen dramatically from 5% in 1972 to 42% in 2025. And when you consider women couldn't even get a checking account until the early 70s, that's impressive. That's a growth of 114% from 1997 to 2017, comparing to 44% for all businesses Again, not surprising because it's women. As of 2025, women-led businesses employ 9.4 million workers and generate $1.9 trillion in revenues annually. This is a substantial increase from previous years, showcasing the growing economic influence of female entrepreneurs. Women of color also now account for 50% of all women-owned businesses in the U.S. There is a particularly strong growth among African American and Black female entrepreneurs. Women have established a very strong presence across various sectors, including food, restaurants, education services, and business services. Female entrepreneurs are 5% more likely to start innovative businesses than men. Does not shock me one bit. Companies with women in leadership roles have shown better financial performance with higher returns compared to broader market indices. Women's startup activity rates have increased from the average of 6.1% between 2001 and 2005 to 10.4% for the 2021 to 2023 period across 30 different countries. Women's established business ownership rates have also risen from 4.2% to 5.9%. There are still a lot of challenges for women, such as access to funding and experiences of gender bias. We don't see that as much in our industry, I don't think, because so many of us are women. But overall, women do face that in other businesses. There has been progress. And a lot of that progress has been started by strong women. And for that, I'm really grateful for all the women who have come before me and cleared that path. I am always amazed at what women can accomplish. I'm going to mess up the Ginger Rogers quote, but she does everything that men do dancing except backwards and in high heels. And sometimes as women, it feels like that's what we're doing. Many of us started our businesses as a way to bring extra income into our families while we were raising young children. Some of us did this because it's the only thing we ever knew. And we didn't know we were workrooms until we were contacted by other workrooms, or because we heard something on a podcast or we read something in a magazine that came once a month. And it was women who did that, who brought people together to understand the value of what they were producing, that they could make a living at it, and that this wasn't just a hobby. This was a way to support their families. I went on to AI and asked what some of the biggest challenges for female entrepreneurs are in the past few decades. And among the key challenges that we face are funding and access to capital, confidence and self-perception. I thought this was really interesting. The number of times that we have talked about imposter syndrome and feeling like we're not enough. The confidence gap remains a significant obstacle for female entrepreneurs. Many women enter the workforce with less confidence in their ability to rise to senior management positions compared to men, 63 versus 75. This lack of self-assurance can impact their willingness to take risks, negotiate, as well as to advocate for themselves. We see this a lot in our industry where people question our pricing, and our confidence can then lead us to make decisions about our pricing. And I think we've come such a long way with that it's encouraging, but it is a bit discouraging to see that it's still a problem. Another key factor in challenges for female entrepreneurs is work-life balance. And I think that it will come to no surprise to most of the people listening to this podcast that even when we have a job outside of the home or run our own businesses, we're still responsible as women for a good deal of the care of the home, care of the children, if we have them, as well as managing everything in our businesses. So that part didn't surprise me at all. The thing that did surprise me, and again, I think this is where our industry is a little bit different, it said that women entrepreneurs often struggle to build strong professional networks and find suitable mentors. I feel like that is not a problem in our industry. There are parts of our country, the United States, and parts of Canada where I know there are not local groups or people that someone can work with, but we have so many opportunities to meet up online, whether it's through the Curtains and Soft Furnishings Resource Library, online courses offered by Workroom Tech, WCAA and their virtual chapter. There are a lot of opportunities that we have, and I think we take advantage of it. Add that to the Custom Workroom Conference every year, and we do have opportunities to get together in person, even if we're traveling to do it. So I thought about finishing up this podcast by listing some of the women who have had an impact on me and my business. And I realized that surely I would forget someone who was incredibly important. And I started a list, and it got longer and longer and longer. And I realized that I could never do justice to the women who had helped me. Some are not even in this industry anymore, but they held my hand and have stayed my friend way past the time that we had this industry in common. The chain of events that led me to be where I am today is supported entirely by the women I met along the way. It was going to my very first conference and Cheryl Strickland letting me in at the very last minute, and I mean very last minute, to go to a conference about a topic I knew absolutely nothing about, and met some incredible teachers and didn't know a soul who was in attendance, but walked up to a booth that said the Southeastern Pennsylvania chapter of the Window Covering Association of America. And I was greeted and welcomed and was told when the next meeting was, which I attended. And that group welcomed me with open arms. And through that, I started to meet other people in this industry. I joined the New Jersey chapter and met people there. I went to Windows to Success, which they held every year, and met teachers in our industry who taught me, and have been supported every step along the way by other women in this industry. Men, I don't mean to leave you out, but it's Women's History Month, so I'm going to give all the credit to women this time. There are so many of you who have helped lead the way, and I think that while we should be celebrating women every day during this month of March, I want to honor the women who have helped me become the entrepreneur that I am. I want to honor the women who have been my friend when they could have been my competition. And I want to say thank you to those of you in this industry who teach and who share the knowledge. Some of you do it in your workrooms, some of you do it online, some of you do it in person, but you share the skills that you have worked so hard to acquire and help other people so that they can also run their own business. And for that, I'm very grateful. I feel very lucky to be in this industry and to know so many incredible women. So cheers to the women in our industry, cheers to women everywhere, and happy Women's History Month to all of you. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you have a great day and a great Women's History Month.